Every time the storms rolled through the mountains, she knew what would follow: the bear. Waiting outside her cabin, silent, watching. She didn't know why. But the night she finally stepped outside, everything changed. The storm that night was unlike any she had seen in months. The mountains groaned under the weight of the wind, and the pines bowed as if praying to be spared. Rain hammered the roof of the old cabin in violent bursts, seeping through cracks despite her best efforts to seal them. Martha Reed, a wildlife biologist who had chosen this remote outpost for her research, sat curled near the wood stove, notebook resting on her knees. She had grown used to the rhythm of isolation, the endless quiet of the forest interrupted only by weather and wildlife. But the scratching came first. At first, she thought it was branches tearing against the cabin's siding, but the sound was too deliberate. Slow, steady, dragging against the wood. She froze, every muscle rigid. The storm masked most of the outside world, but she knew that sound wasn't made by wind. She crept toward the narrow window near the door, lantern in hand. Her breath caught in her chest when she saw it. The bear. Massive, drenched, its dark fur plastered against a body that looked carved from the mountain itself. It stood not 10 feet from her porch, head lowered but eyes fixed on the cabin door. Water dripped from its muzzle, forming dark spots on the mud below. Her instinct screamed danger. This was no casual wanderer, this was deliberate. The bear wasn't passing through. It was waiting. She didn't move, barely dared to breathe. Bears didn't stalk cabins for no reason. Something had drawn it here. And yet, as quickly as it had appeared, the animal turned slowly, lumbering back into the trees, vanishing into the storm as though swallowed by it. Martha remained rooted to the spot long after it left, lantern shaking in her grip. The next morning, she found the tracks. Large, deliberate impressions pressed deep into the mud around her cabin. They circled the porch, paused near the window, then led back into the forest. As she crouched to study them, she noticed something else: the tracks weren't fresh. Beneath last night's layer of mud, older impressions had settled into the earth. Her stomach tightened. The bear had been here before. She returned inside, heart racing. All day, she couldn't shake the thought, it wasn't coincidence. Every storm brought the bear. By nightfall, the wind rose again. Another front moved through the valley, rattling the shutters. Martha tried to work, scribbling notes about local elk movements, but her hand shook too much to form straight lines. Then, the sound returned. Not scratching this time. Breathing. Deep, heavy, wet breaths, just beyond the door. She rose, blood rushing to her ears. Her lantern light flickered as she approached the window. There it was again. The bear. This time closer, its massive frame filling the porch, head tilted, eyes glinting with something that made her chest tighten. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't hunger. It was watchfulness. The bear didn't move. Didn't challenge. Just stood there, as if guarding her against the storm raging around them both. Martha pressed her palm against the wooden door, separating them by a few inches of timber and iron hinges. And then, it stepped forward. The porch boards groaned under its weight. Her breath caught. If it pushed, the door might not hold. The lantern flickered again, the storm howled louder, and the bear's shadow swallowed the room. She had seconds to decide: run, hide, or face what waited outside. The latch rattled. Something, or someone, was testing the cabin door from the outside. The rattle at the latch sent ice through Martha's spine. The bear wasn't just lingering now, it was pressing against the boundary that separated them. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it above the storm. She backed away slowly, every instinct screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. The cabin was small, one room and a loft. No back exit, no escape hatch. Just her, the thin wood of the door, and the giant shadow looming on the other side. The latch jerked again, harder this time. Then silence. She stood frozen, waiting for claws or brute force to splinter the wood. But the attack never came. Instead, she heard a long, guttural exhale, a sigh that seemed almost weary. Then, just as before, the bear turned away. She didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the timbers sounded like paw steps, every gust of wind like claws on wood. By dawn, when the storm had passed, she finally dared to open the door. The porch bore the evidence of its visit, muddy paw prints smeared across the boards, the latch scratched but intact. She crouched, tracing her fingers over the grooves. The marks weren't made in anger. They were tentative, like an animal testing its environment rather than trying to destroy it. Still, the unease refused to leave her chest. That morning, Martha hiked a mile to set new trail cameras near the ridge, hoping to capture the bear's movements. Her work as a biologist gave her discipline. She recorded her observations, measured the paw size from the prints. Nearly 9 inches across. A male, she guessed. Powerful, old. A survivor. But questions gnawed at her. Why return after every storm? Why her cabin? As the day wore on, she found herself glancing constantly toward the tree-line. The silence of the woods felt charged, as though she were being watched. By late afternoon, storm clouds gathered again, thick and dark. She hurried back, stacking more wood by the door, checking the shutters. A pattern was forming, and she felt both dread and anticipation tighten inside her. And right on cue, the storm broke. Rain lashed the roof, thunder rolled through the valley, and the bear returned. She saw it first through the slats of the shutter. The shape materialized between sheets of rain, moving slowly, almost methodically, until it emerged into the clearing before the cabin. Her breath caught. It was bigger than she remembered, fur plastered to its shoulders, steam rising from its body in the cold air. Its presence filled the space, both terrifying and magnetic. She forced herself to grab her camera, snapping a few shaky photographs through the glass. The scientist in her demanded proof, but the woman in her felt something else entirely. The bear climbed onto the porch. Heavy steps, deliberate. It didn't scratch this time. Didn't test the door. Instead, it lay down. Martha's mouth went dry. The massive animal curled itself just outside her door, rain dripping from its coat, chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. Guarding. Watching. She dared to kneel by the window, peering out. It wasn't asleep, but its eyes were half-lidded, calm. Its position was unmistakable, like a sentinel. Hours passed this way. The storm raged on, but she felt protected. For the first time in weeks, the wind and thunder didn't seem so menacing. The bear was there, just feet away, bearing the storm for both of them. But protection from what? The thought cut through her calm. What if the bear wasn't there for her, but because something else was? By midnight, the storm eased. She rose cautiously, lantern in hand, and dared a look outside again. The porch was empty. The bear was gone. But not far. She spotted the outline at the edge of the clearing, still watching. It remained until dawn, when the forest brightened with pale light. Only then did it turn and melt into the trees. Exhausted, Martha collapsed into her chair by the stove, camera clutched in her lap. She replayed the images again and again. The massive frame sprawled across her porch. The watchful eyes. The unexplainable stillness. By the third storm that week, she was ready. She left the lantern lit, sat by the door with her notebook, and waited. The bear came. But this time, something was different. She opened the notebook, pen poised, whispering to herself, "What do you want from me?" The bear lifted its head, ears twitching. Its gaze locked with hers through the thin wood. Then, a sound broke through the storm. Not thunder. Not wind. Something else. From the treeline came a low, chilling howl. Wolves. The bear rose instantly, head snapping toward the sound, body tense. And Martha realized, heart hammering in her chest, that the bear hadn't been guarding her cabin from the storm at all. It had been guarding her from them. The howls grew louder, closer, until shapes began to move in the rain-soaked forest. The sound came again. Low, chilling howls that rose and fell like waves rolling through the storm. Martha gripped the lantern tighter, her knuckles bone white. The forest that had always been her sanctuary now felt like a stage for something primal, something older than her presence here. She leaned closer to the window, peering into the darkness. Shapes moved just beyond the clearing, slipping between tree trunks like ghosts. At first there were 2, then 3, then more. Their eyes reflected pale in the flashes of lightning, scattered points of light circling the cabin like embers in the night. The bear on the porch rose to its full height, a hulking silhouette that dwarfed the doorway. Martha felt her throat tighten as it gave a deep, rumbling growl, one that vibrated through the wood beneath her feet. It wasn't a sound meant for her, it was meant for them. The wolves answered with a chorus of snarls, gathering closer. Martha stepped back from the door. Her instincts, honed from years of studying wildlife, told her this wasn't normal. Wolves avoided humans. They avoided cabins, lanterns, and noise. Yet here they were, circling, probing, unafraid. And the bear seemed to know they would come. The thought unsettled her. Was this pattern, the bear's return after every storm, less about her and more about this? About the wolves that prowled the valley once the rains drove elk and deer toward lower ground? Her lantern flickered. She held her breath, listening. The storm muffled most sound, but she could hear the crunch of paws on wet earth, the faint scrape of claws as the wolves drew nearer. Then, a sharp yelp cut through the rain. A scuffle. The bear lunged forward, massive body slamming against the porch rail as it snapped its jaws toward the treeline. Martha pressed her palms against the glass, trying to follow the blur of motion outside. A wolf darted too close, testing the bear's reach. With terrifying speed, the bear swung one massive paw, sending the smaller predator tumbling back into the mud. A snarl rose from the shadows, and more shapes pressed closer. Martha's chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was trapped inside a cabin with no way out. She could only watch as the storm raged and 2 forces of nature clashed on her doorstep. Another lightning flash. She caught sight of 5, no, 6 wolves. Too many, even for a bear of his size. The odds churned in her head like a storm of their own. And yet, the wolves didn't rush. They circled, tested, waited. As if they knew the bear was stronger, and patience might wear it down. Martha ducked low, clutching her notebook like it could anchor her in this madness. She scrawled frantic words, "Bear returns after storms." Not coincidence. Wolves arrive too. Is he defending territory? Defending me? Her pen slipped with the shaking of her hand. A crash at the porch made her jump. One of the wolves had leapt onto the steps, teeth bared. The bear turned, jaws snapping with a thunderous crack that echoed against the cabin walls. Martha screamed despite herself. Her breath fogged the glass as she watched the predator retreat, yelping back into the storm. The bear didn't chase, he held his ground. Another flash. The wolves had spread out, forming a crescent around the clearing. Lightning lit their eyes, glinting like tiny mirrors. Martha realized with horror that they weren't retreating. They were waiting. The bear paced, massive form turning to each side of the clearing, growling low. The storm pounded on, unrelenting, rain soaking his fur into a darker shade of shadow. Hours dragged like days. Wolves circling, the bear standing guard, Martha's body locked in a crouch by the door. The storm refused to break, thunder masking every sound except growls and snapping jaws. She whispered to herself, voice hoarse. Why here? Why now? And then she remembered. The first storm, 2 weeks ago, when the bear had appeared for the first time. The storm had driven her deep into the cabin. She hadn't gone outside until morning. And that morning, she had found something strange near the tree line. A carcass. A deer, half consumed, but abandoned too quickly. As though something larger had interrupted the wolves mid-feast. Her stomach twisted. Could it have been the bear? Had he disrupted them then, too? If so, this wasn't new. It was war. The thought jolted her to her feet. She stumbled to her desk, fumbling for the flare gun she kept in a drawer. Only 2 rounds left. Enough to startle predators, maybe. Not enough to fight off a pack. Her hands shook as she loaded it. The wolves hadn't attacked her yet. They hadn't even approached the cabin, not directly. They wanted the bear. But if they overwhelmed him, what then? Would they turn on her next? Another crash. She spun toward the door. A wolf had thrown itself against the porch rail again, snarling, eyes locked on the massive shape that blocked its way. The bear roared, sound shaking the cabin walls. It lunged forward, teeth flashing. The wolf vanished into the storm. The pack howled in reply. The sound raised the hairs on Martha's neck. This wasn't over. Her lantern sputtered, light dimming as oil ran low. Darkness crept in around her, swallowing the edges of the room. She stood at the window, flare gun clutched, watching as her only protector braced against 6, maybe 7 predators. And then, for the first time, she saw it falter. The bear lowered its head, chest heaving. Its massive body sagged just slightly, as though fatigue tugged at its muscles. The wolves saw it too. From the tree line, one darted forward, then another. Lightning illuminated the clearing as they leapt, gray shadows against the storm. Martha's scream tore from her throat as she raised the flare gun. The flare fired, but the storm swallowed its light, and the wolves were already airborne. The flare exploded into the storm like a dying star. Red light burst across the clearing, momentarily turning the rain into streaks of fire. For a heartbeat, the wolves faltered, their charge broken by the sudden blaze overhead. Martha held her breath, the pistol trembling in her grip. She prayed the flare would buy them time. But the storm was merciless. Sheets of rain swallowed the glow, dragging it into grayness until only smoke trailed in the sky. The forest was dark again. And the wolves were moving. 2 lunged in unison. The bear met them mid-leap, teeth sinking into fur and flesh. A yelp split the night as one wolf crumpled into the mud, writhing before slinking back toward the tree line. The other hit the porch hard, claws scraping across the wet boards. The bear swung, massive paw colliding with bone. The wolf was hurled against the railing, snapping wood in a burst of splinters. It scrambled back, limping into the storm. But more were coming. Martha's breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed her forehead against the glass. She wanted to turn away, to hide, but she couldn't. Every moment was etched into her eyes. The bear was fighting for his life, and, she realized with a chill, for hers too. 3 wolves circled low, darting in, snapping, retreating. They tested him with military precision, always moving, always searching for weakness. The bear snarled, swiping left and right, forcing them back. But she saw it again, the slight sag of his shoulders, the heaviness in his breathing. He was tiring. Martha fumbled with the flare gun, heart sinking as her fingers brushed the empty chamber. Only 1 shot left. 1 chance. She clutched it tight, mind racing. Should she fire into the pack? Try to scare them? Or save it, in case they breached the cabin itself? Another crash rattled the porch. 1 wolf leapt higher this time, jaws snapping at the bear's throat. The giant lunged sideways, teeth clamping down on the wolf's flank, and with a sickening shake, hurled it across the clearing. It didn't rise again. But the distraction cost him. A blur of gray slammed into his hindquarters. Another wolf tore at his flank, teeth flashing in the red smear of blood. The bear roared, spinning, but the damage was done. His back leg buckled, staggering under the weight. Martha screamed, slamming her fists against the window. No. Leave him. Her own voice startled her. She'd been silent so long, hiding behind glass and wood. But the words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. She didn't know why she cared, why the survival of a wild bear felt tied so deeply to her own. But she did. And the wolves heard her. Their heads snapped toward the cabin. Eyes glowed as they shifted focus. For the first time, Martha saw it, not hunger, not instinct. Curiosity. They had known she was there all along. The bear roared, staggering to his feet, forcing their attention back. He lunged again, forcing 1 wolf into the mud, jaws closing with brutal finality. The others circled wider now, cautious. Martha's pulse pounded in her throat. Her flare gun felt heavy, useless. She wanted to do something, anything, but what could she do against predators that lived and breathed survival? Another flash of lightning lit the clearing. For an instant, everything was frozen in blinding white. She saw the wolves, 7 shadows circling. The bear, massive, blood streaking his fur. And her cabin, fragile, fragile, a thin shelter against the wild. Then darkness again. The wolves pulled back, regrouping. Their howls pierced the night, high and sharp, echoing across the valley. They weren't finished. They were calling the rest. Martha's knees buckled. More? How many more? The bear turned, bloodied muzzle lifting to the storm. His breath came in harsh clouds, steam rising off his battered frame. He didn't retreat. Didn't yield. He planted himself between her cabin and the shadows, as if declaring the ground his. The storm raged, wind howling through the trees like the wolves themselves. Martha pressed her palm against the door, whispering through the wood. Why? Why do you keep coming back here? No answer came, only the steady sound of his breathing, the low rumble in his chest that vibrated like thunder. And then, silence. The wolves had stopped. No howls, no growls, no movement. Just silence. Martha's skin prickled. She knew enough of predators to recognize it. They weren't retreating. They were waiting. Lightning flared again, and in the distance, she saw them. More shapes slipping between trees, more eyes glowing in the dark. The pack had doubled. Her stomach dropped. The bear gave a deep, guttural growl, head turning toward the swelling shadows. His muscles trembled, blood dripping down his flank, but his stance didn't waver. Martha's vision blurred with tears. She couldn't just stand by. She couldn't watch him fight alone until he fell. She grabbed her coat, jammed the flare into her pocket, and shoved her boots on with trembling hands. The storm howled as she pulled open the door. Cold air and rain slammed into her, but she stepped out onto the porch, lantern in one hand, flare in the other. The bear turned his head, eyes locking on her for the first time without glass between them. For a moment, she swore there was understanding there, confusion, maybe even warning. But she lifted her chin, voice shaking but firm. If you're going to stand here, so am I. The wolves shifted, uneasy, eyes narrowing at the new light. The storm built again, thunder splitting the sky, rain blinding in sheets. And in that chaos, a single wolf broke from the pack. It wasn't charging the bear. It was charging her. The wolf launched onto the porch, teeth bared, and Martha's finger tightened on the flare trigger. The wolf came like a shadow ripped free of the storm. Its body was lean and fast, jaws wide, teeth flashing white in the lantern glow. Martha had no time to think, only to act. Her finger squeezed the trigger. The flare exploded in her hand, a blinding red burst that lit the porch like daylight. The wolf was caught midair, eyes wide, just before the blazing projectile slammed into the ground inches from its paws. The creature twisted mid-leap, landing awkwardly and skidding across the slick boards. Martha stumbled back, the recoil jolting her shoulder. The flare sizzled, hissing smoke into the rain. The wolf scrambled away, retreating into the shadows, a low yelp trailing after it. Her chest heaved, lungs burning with cold air. The pistol slipped from her hand, clattering onto the wet boards. She only had that one shot left, and it was gone. The bear roared, stepping forward with renewed fury. Its massive body loomed beside her, soaked and bloodied, but unyielding. For a fleeting second, Martha felt the strangest sensation, as though they weren't two separate creatures anymore, but one force standing against the night. The wolves regrouped in the clearing. Their eyes glinted in the fading red glow of the flare, circling, calculating. The pack had grown larger, easily a dozen now. Their howls rose, echoing over the storm, a sound so primal that it pierced Martha's chest. "They're not leaving," she whispered, voice shaking. The bear's growl answered her, low and steady. It didn't waver. He stepped off the porch, paws sinking into the mud. The wolves parted, cautious, but didn't retreat. Martha's breath caught. He was leaving the protection of the cabin. Going to face them head-on. "No," she cried, gripping the porch railing. "You'll be torn apart." But the bear didn't turn back. The clash was sudden and brutal. The wolves surged as one, gray shadows converging on the massive frame. Snarls and roars collided with thunder. Fur, teeth, and claws blurred in the storm. Martha's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to look away, but her eyes refused. Every motion burned into her memory. A wolf leapt for the bear's shoulder, jaws snapped shut, dragging it down. Another darted for his hind leg. The bear swung, sending one flying, then twisted, crushing another beneath his weight. But there were too many. Martha stumbled down the porch steps, boots sinking into mud. She couldn't stand still any longer. She didn't know what she could do, but she couldn't watch him die. Her lantern's light shook wildly in her hand as she screamed, her voice raw, "Get away from him." The wolves hesitated. For an instant, their eyes flicked toward her. And that instant was enough. The bear surged upward, massive jaws closing around the neck of the wolf, pinning him. A sickening crack split the storm as the animal went limp. Martha's cry echoed in her own ears. She felt reckless, exposed, but she couldn't stop. She grabbed the only thing within reach, a length of wood from the porch stack, and swung it wildly at the nearest shadow. It connected with a thud, surprising her more than the wolf, which snarled and darted back. The bear roared again, blood spraying from his muzzle. His eyes met hers for a fleeting moment. And she understood he wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting to hold the line. Her. The cabin. Everything behind him. The wolves regrouped, snarling, but less bold now. The storm seemed to rage louder, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. Martha's arm ached from gripping the wood. Her knees trembled, but she stood firm at the base of the porch. The bear limped, bleeding, yet his stance never faltered. Then something shifted. From deeper in the woods came a howl, louder, deeper, commanding. The pack froze. The sound rolled through the storm like a drumbeat. This wasn't the scattered howling of hungry scavengers. This was a leader. Martha's stomach dropped. She scanned the treeline, lantern casting weak circles of light. At first she saw nothing. Then, slowly, a larger shape emerged. The Alpha. It was enormous for a wolf, taller, broader, its fur darker, matted by rain. Its eyes burned in the stormlight, fixed on the bear with a cold, unflinching gaze. The pack parted, making way. The bear lowered his head, growl rumbling so deep Martha felt it in her bones. His body swayed, weakened by wounds, but he didn't retreat. Martha gripped the railing again, nails biting into the wood. "You can't fight them all," she whispered. The Alpha stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The storm seemed to hush around it, rain muffled, thunder distant. Every wolf crouched, waiting. The bear's roar shattered the silence, loud and defiant. He surged forward, meeting the Alpha in the clearing. The impact was thunderous. Two titans colliding, claws ripping, jaws clamping. The pack howled in frenzy, circling but not interfering. This was no longer about numbers. This was a duel. Martha's heart pounded so hard she thought it would break her ribs. She wanted to scream, to rush in, to do anything, but her legs refused to move. She stood frozen, lantern light shaking, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. The bear staggered under the Alpha's weight, teeth sinking into his shoulder. He roared, twisting, throwing the wolf aside. Mud sprayed, bodies collided again, a blur of fury and strength. Blood stained the clearing. Martha clutched her chest. She couldn't bear to watch, yet couldn't look away. She whispered over and over, "Please, please don't fall." The Alpha circled, lips peeled back in a snarl. The bear limped, chest heaving, yet his eyes blazed. He charged again, meeting the wolf with bone-rattling force. For a moment, it looked as if he would win. His jaws closed around the Alpha's neck. Martha gasped, hope rising. But then, the Alpha twisted, snapping at his face. The bear recoiled, blinded for a split second. And in that second, the wolf lunged for his throat. Martha screamed so loudly her voice tore. She dropped the lantern, its glass shattering, plunging the clearing into shadows. The Alpha's jaws closed around the bear's neck, and the darkness swallowed them both. The clearing had gone black. The lantern lay shattered at Martha's feet, glass glittering in the mud, its flame drowned by the rain. For a heartbeat she thought the world itself had ended. The storm roared above, wolves circled in shadows, and somewhere in the darkness, two titans fought for breath. Then came the sound. A deep, guttural roar, muffled and strangled, torn by pain. The bear. His voice thundered through the storm, not the sound of triumph, but of defiance against the jaws locked on his throat. The alpha growled back, low and steady, twisting deeper, forcing the great beast down. Martha's chest tightened. She could see nothing but flashes when lightning split the sky, illuminating brief, terrible images. The alpha clamped to the bear's neck, the pack crouched low, waiting, the bear's massive body shuddering under the pressure. Her body moved before her mind could argue. She snatched the length of wood she'd dropped earlier and ran into the clearing, boots sliding in the mud. "Get off him," she screamed, her voice cracking. The wolves snarled, forming a barrier, eyes gleaming in the rain. One lunged toward her, snapping jaws inches from her leg. Martha swung wildly, the wood connecting with a sharp crack. The animal yelped, retreating into the dark. But the pack didn't scatter. They held their ground, pressing in closer, a wall of muscle and teeth. The bear's roar faltered. His knees buckled. The alpha dug deeper, claws raking across his chest. Blood mingled with rain, streaking the mud red. "No!" Martha sobbed, her arms trembling. She swung again and again, but the wolves flanked her, snapping, forcing her back. The wood in her hands splintered, slippery with rain. She knew she couldn't hold them off much longer. And then, another flash of lightning. The bear surged. With one last desperate heave, he twisted his entire body, slamming the alpha onto the ground with a thud that shook the earth beneath her boots. The wolf's jaws ripped free of his throat, tearing flesh, but the bear didn't falter. He brought his weight down, claws sinking deep, his roar exploding through the valley. The alpha writhed, snapping, but this time the bear did not yield. His jaws closed around the wolf's shoulder and crushed down. Bone cracked, sharp and final. The pack howled in chaos, some retreating, others lunging forward in confusion. Martha staggered back toward the porch, eyes wide, heart hammering so violently it drowned the storm itself. The alpha twisted one last time, a flash of white teeth, and then the bear slammed him down again. The sound of the wolf's breath breaking was unmistakable. Silence followed. The pack froze. The leader lay still beneath the bear's massive paw, chest heaving once, twice, then not at all. One by one, the wolves lowered their heads. Not in grief, but in recognition. The storm carried their howls as they backed away, slipping into the trees. Their glowing eyes vanished into the rain, swallowed by the forest. Martha fell to her knees in the mud, gasping. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't wipe the rain and tears from her face. The clearing was empty now, save for the bear and the still body of the alpha. The bear stood swaying, blood pouring from his throat, chest, and legs. His breaths came ragged, heavy, each one sounding like it might be his last. He glanced toward Martha. Their eyes met. She had never seen such weariness in a creature's gaze. Not defeat, not surrender, but the sheer exhaustion of one who had given everything and had nothing left to give. "Don't," Martha choked out, crawling closer through the mud. "Don't fall. Please don't fall." The bear staggered, his paw sliding from the wolf's body. He collapsed onto his side, the ground trembling beneath him. His chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath weaker than the last. Martha's heart broke at the sight. She stumbled closer, ignoring the blood soaking into her hands as she pressed them against his wounds. The warmth terrified her, too hot, too much. "No, no, stay with me," she whispered desperately, voice trembling. "You saved me. You saved all of us. You can't go like this." The storm thundered overhead, but her world had narrowed to the space between her palms and his fading heartbeat. She pressed harder, trying to stop the flow, though she knew it was useless. She had no medical kit, no weapons left, nothing but her bare hands. The bear's eyes fluttered open. His gaze locked onto hers again. For a moment, she thought she saw something, not human, not mystical, but a simple, primal recognition. She was there. He was not alone. A sob tore from her throat. She leaned closer, whispering as if words could anchor him, "You're not going to die here. Not in this storm. Not after everything." She searched frantically around the porch. Rope. Canvas. Anything. Her mind raced. She needed to bind the wounds, stop the bleeding, keep him breathing until dawn. She had no plan, only instinct. Thunder cracked. Her lantern's glass glittered like tiny stars in the mud. And suddenly Martha realized there was one chance. The flare gun. It lay on the porch where she'd dropped it, empty but not useless. If she could light a fire, create heat, warmth, maybe she could keep him alive through the night. She scrambled for it, slipped in the mud, caught herself, and rushed back. Her fingers shook as she scraped steel against flint, desperate to spark tinder from the woodpile. Each strike felt like eternity, but finally, a flicker. A fragile flame, clinging against the rain. Martha shielded it with her body, coaxing it to life. She built it into a small blaze, feeding it wood, shielding it from the storm with the remains of a broken crate. The glow spread, pushing shadows back. The clearing warmed with orange light. She dragged canvas from the porch, draping it across the bear's massive body. She pressed strips of cloth against his worst wounds, tying them tight with rope. Her hands worked furiously, heart racing, tears streaming, lips muttering the same plea over and over. "Don't you die. Don't you leave me here." The bear groaned, a low rumble, weak but alive. His chest rose again. Martha exhaled, shuddering. Relief flooded her so quickly she nearly collapsed. He wasn't gone. Not yet. The wolves were gone, the alpha lay silent, and the storm still raged. But here, in the small circle of firelight, it was just the two of them. Human and bear. Survivor and survivor. Martha sank down beside him, her head resting against his soaked fur. Her body trembled from exhaustion, but she refused to close her eyes. She would not sleep. Not while he breathed. And so they waited, the fire crackling, the storm howling, and the bear's ragged breath marking time against the night. But even as she whispered promises into the rain, Martha knew the truth. Dawn would not heal him. His body was torn, bleeding, broken. Without help, he would not see another storm. And the nearest town was 2 days away. Martha realizes the bear won't survive without help, and she has no way to get him to safety through the storm. The fire hissed and spat as rain slid down Martha's arms. Her hands were stiff with cold, skin raw from pressing against wounds too large to cover. The makeshift bandages she'd tied were soaked crimson, and still the blood seeped through. Every few minutes the bear groaned, a low, guttural sound that rattled her chest and sent panic racing down her spine. She whispered to him like he could understand. "Stay with me. Just stay." But she knew the truth. She could feel it in the tremor of his ribs against her palm. His breaths came shallow now, each one weaker than the last. The fire warmed him, kept him from slipping too fast, but warmth alone couldn't mend torn muscle or shattered bone. Martha's mind reeled. What could she do? What should she do? The nearest ranger station was 2 days away on foot, maybe more with the storm. Her truck was down the mountain, fuel nearly empty, roads washed out. Even if she could get there, what then? Call for a vet? A wildlife officer? Who would come for a bear bleeding out in the middle of nowhere? She looked at him. His head lay heavy on the mud, eyes half shut, fur matted with blood and rain. He looked smaller now, not the towering giant who had faced down a pack of wolves. Just an animal, broken and fading. And yet, he had stood between her and death. Again and again. Her throat tightened. Could she really just watch him die here, after everything? The storm growled, lightning flashing in the valley. Martha shivered, gripping her knees. If I leave for help, you'll be gone before I get back. The thought hollowed her chest. Her whole body shook. But another thought pressed harder, if I don't try. I'll be the reason you die. The weight of it crushed her. She had survived storms, loneliness, hunger, but never this. Never a choice where both paths led to loss. The bear shifted, a weak rumble rising from his throat. His eyes opened halfway, finding her again. Even through the haze of pain, they locked on hers. Not pleading, not fearful. Just present. Just watching. Martha's breath broke. I can't leave you, she whispered. I can't. But she also couldn't sit by and do nothing. Her gaze snapped to the woodshed by the cabin. The sled. She had built it years ago to haul firewood, thick logs dragged behind by her snowmobile. Heavy, sturdy. Her mind sparked. If she could get the bear onto the sled, cover him, tie him down, she could use the snowmobile to haul him down the mountain. Her pulse quickened. It was insane. The sled wasn't built for something this massive. The trails would be mud and rock after the storm. One wrong turn and they'd both go over a cliff. But what other choice was there? Martha rose, legs trembling. She stumbled toward the shed, pulled the sled out into the rain. The wood creaked, slick with water, rope coiled across its frame. She dragged it closer, her muscles burning, heart hammering with a mix of fear and resolve. When she reached the bear, she hesitated. How? He was easily 400 pounds, maybe more. Her body couldn't lift him, not even close. But she had to try. She looped the rope around his forelegs, bracing her boots in the mud. Come on, she muttered through gritted teeth. She pulled with everything in her, every ounce of strength in her back, her shoulders, her legs. The bear groaned, body shifting an inch, then another. Her lungs screamed, muscles tearing fire through her arms. She collapsed, gasping. Tears mixed with rain. It wasn't enough. She couldn't move him far. But she refused to stop. Again and again she tried, shifting him a little at a time, dragging him inch by inch toward the sled. The storm raged, her hands bled from rope burns, but still she pulled. Every time she faltered, she looked at him, his chest rising shallowly, eyes flickering, and something inside her lit again. Finally, after what felt like hours, she got his massive shoulder onto the edge of the sled. She shoved, pushed, screamed, using her whole body until he slid onto the wood with a heavy thud. The sled rocked, groaned, but held. Martha collapsed beside him, chest heaving, arms shaking. She wanted to fall asleep right there in the mud, but she forced herself up. She pulled canvas over his body, tied it tight with rope, leaving space for him to breathe. He groaned again, faint but alive. Martha stroked his soaked fur, whispering, "I've got you. I'll get you down." Her snowmobile sat by the cabin, half buried in mud. She checked the fuel gauge, almost empty. Her heart pounded. Would it even make it? Would it have the power to drag both sled and bear through the storm-slick trails? She climbed on, turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Relief surged, but it was fleeting. This was only the beginning. She tied the sled rope to the back, checked the knots twice, then 3 times. Her hands trembled. One mistake and he would be left behind. She climbed back on the snowmobile. Her stomach twisted, fear clawing her insides. "This is insane," she muttered. But behind her, the bear breathed. She gripped the handlebars, teeth clenched. "Hold on." The snowmobile lurched forward, treads spitting mud. The sled groaned, ropes creaking, but it moved. Slowly, inch by inch, the weight followed. Martha's breath caught. It was working. But the mountain was waiting. And every turn, every slope, every stone in the storm-slick trail could end them both. The sled holds as Martha begins the descent, but the storm deepens, and ahead lies the most dangerous stretch of the mountain trail. The snowmobile growled as its treads fought for grip against the soaked earth. Rain hammered Martha's face, plastering her hair to her skin. Her hands clenched the handlebars so tightly her knuckles burned white. Behind her, the sled dragged through the mud with a deep groan, the canvas-covered shape of the bear shifting with each jolt. The storm was worse down here. Trees whipped in the wind, their branches bending dangerously low. Water poured down the trail like a river, cutting gullies into the mud. Every rock, every rut threatened to snag the sled or snap the ropes. Martha leaned forward, urging the machine on. "Come on. Don't quit now." The engine sputtered, coughing as water splashed across its frame. For a sickening second she thought it would die, but it roared back, claws of steel biting into the earth. She risked a glance behind. The sled skidded wildly, bouncing off roots, nearly tipping. The bear's body rolled with the motion, canvas flapping in the storm. Martha's stomach lurched. If the sled flipped, if the ropes tore? She gunned the throttle, pulling harder, trying to steady the load. Her eyes burned from rain and exhaustion. Every turn demanded precision, but her body shook with fatigue. The trail narrowed, curving around a steep drop where the mountain fell away into darkness. Martha's breath caught. This was the part she had dreaded most, a narrow ledge carved by years of storms, mud slick and treacherous. To her left, jagged rock. To her right, nothing but air and the roar of the valley far below. The snowmobile's headlights cut through the sheets of rain, illuminating the drop. Her pulse hammered in her throat. One mistake here, and they wouldn't just fall, they'd vanish into the abyss. She slowed, guiding the machine onto the ledge. The treads slipped, spraying mud. The sled scraped hard against the rocks, jerking the snowmobile sideways. Martha wrestled the handlebars, teeth clenched, fighting the pull toward the cliff. The bear groaned weakly from the sled. The sound cut deeper than any storm. "I know," she whispered through gritted teeth. "I know. Just hold on." The wind slammed against her, threatening to rip her off the seat. She leaned into it, muscles screaming, every nerve on fire. The sled tilted, one edge lifting as the trail slanted toward the drop. "No, no, no," she yanked the throttle, dragging hard left. The sled slammed back down, canvas tearing, rope straining. The sound of snapping fibers made her blood run cold. She couldn't lose the line, not here. The snowmobile lurched forward, engine howling. The ledge stretched endlessly, a thin scar on the mountain. Halfway across, lightning cracked, blinding white. For a second the whole valley lit up, revealing the chaos around her, trees bent nearly double, boulders loosened by rain tumbling down the slopes, torrents of water cascading across the trail. And then, thunder. A boom so violent it shook the ground. The mountain responded. A rockslide thundered above, stones breaking free, slamming onto the trail ahead. Martha's eyes widened in horror as boulders the size of barrels crashed across the ledge, smashing into mud and splintering trees. She froze. The path ahead was blocked. Her mind raced. There was no turning back, the sled made reversing impossible. No going forward, the rocks were too many. The bear groaned again, weaker this time. Martha's chest clenched. She couldn't stop. Not here. Her eyes darted to the side, to the slope above. The rocks weren't falling in a steady stream, just a burst, then silence. If she timed it, if she went now. Her body shook. It was suicide. But so was waiting. She sucked in a ragged breath, braced her body against the handlebars, and shouted over the storm, "Hold on." She gunned the throttle. The snowmobile roared, shooting forward, treads spitting mud. The sled jolted behind, scraping rock, bouncing wildly. A boulder crashed inches in front of her, spraying shards of stone across her legs. She ducked low, swerving around it, the sled slamming hard against its side. Another rock thundered down, glancing off the sled with a crack that splintered wood. Martha screamed but didn't slow. The trail shook beneath her, rumbling like the mountain itself wanted them gone. She swerved left, then right, dodging, slipping, barely clinging to control. Her heart pounded in her throat. And then, silence. The slide ended as quickly as it had begun. The trail ahead was clear. Martha didn't let up until they were across the ledge, onto wider ground. She killed the throttle, chest heaving, lungs on fire. For a long moment, she just sat there, rain streaming down her face, body trembling from head to toe. Then she twisted around, eyes locked on the sled. The canvas was torn, ropes frayed, wood cracked. But the bear was still there. Heaved onto his side, chest rising weakly. Alive. Martha's knees buckled with relief. She pressed her forehead to the handlebars, sobbing once, hard, before forcing herself upright. Almost there, she whispered hoarsely. Just hold on a little longer. But the storm had other plans. As she urged the snowmobile forward again, the headlights swept across the trail and revealed water. A river, swollen by the storm, had burst across the path. The torrent raged from slope to slope, deep and fast, carrying branches and stones in its current. Martha's stomach dropped. The water was too deep for the treads to grip, too strong to wade through. If she tried, the snowmobile would be swept away, sled and all. She killed the engine, staring at the rushing flood. The bear groaned behind her, the sound weaker than ever. She had to find another way down. But in this storm, on this mountain, there was no time. Her chest tightened until it hurt. She turned back, mud and rain streaking her face, staring at the bear. His breath rattled, shallow, but steady. "We're out of time," she whispered. Her eyes scanned the treeline. Higher ground was impossible. Lower ground was flooded. The only chance, the old logging bridge. If it was still standing. Her pulse hammered. It lay half a mile downstream, rickety and half forgotten. She'd crossed it once years ago. If the storm hadn't taken it, it might be their only hope. She wiped her face with trembling hands, gripped the throttle again, and whispered, "We go for the bridge." Martha sets her course for the old logging bridge, but in this storm, there's no guarantee it still stands. The roar of the swollen river stalked Martha as she guided the snowmobile along the trail. Water rushed downhill in furious streams, converging into torrents that gouged trenches into the earth. The storm was relentless, hammering rain, gusts of wind that tore through the trees, thunder rolling like the voice of the mountain itself. Her body was numb from cold and exhaustion, yet every nerve screamed with urgency. Behind her, the sled groaned and skidded, ropes tightening and loosening with each jolt. The bear's body shifted beneath the torn canvas, heavy and fragile all at once. She dared not look back again. If she saw his chest still rising, she would keep going. If it wasn't. Martha shook her head violently. No. She couldn't allow that thought. Not now. The trail veered downward, following the natural curve of the valley toward the river. Mud splattered across her face, stinging her eyes. The snowmobile fishtailed, its treads barely gripping the drenched earth. Martha fought for control, gritting her teeth, leaning hard into every turn. She remembered the bridge. It had been years since she'd seen it, back when she was a teenager riding dirt bikes with her brother. The planks had already been gray and warped then, nails jutting out, the support beams bowed from age. They'd dared each other to cross it, and when she'd gone first, the wood had groaned under her weight. Even at 15, it had felt like it could give way any second. Now she was dragging half a ton of bear across it in the middle of a mountain flood. Her chest tightened. She rounded the bend and slowed. There it was. The bridge clung desperately to its anchors, spanning the raging torrent below. Wooden beams sagged under the assault of the storm, water lapping at its lower planks. A tree trunk slammed against one side, rebounding with a splintering crack. Whole sections of railing dangled uselessly into the water. Martha's heart dropped into her stomach. It was still there. Barely. She pulled the snowmobile to a stop, headlights casting long beams across the wreckage. Rain hammered down, bouncing off the wood. The river beneath was a boiling chaos, white water foaming over rocks, logs and debris swept along like children's toys. If they went in, there'd be no saving either of them. The bear shifted with a low groan. Martha's throat tightened. She climbed off the snowmobile, boots sinking into the mud, and approached the bridge. Every step on the slick planks sent a shudder through her bones. She crouched low, brushing her fingers along the wood. Soft. Rotten. The storm had soaked it to the core. She pressed down harder. The plank bowed but held. Barely. She exhaled, breath shaky. It'll have to do. Her eyes scanned the sled. The ropes were frayed, canvas flapping like a wounded sail. The bear's head shifted slightly, eyes half-lidded, breath shallow but steady. She stepped closer, brushing the wet fur along his neck. Not much farther, she whispered. The wind whipped her words away, but she felt them anyway. Martha climbed back onto the snowmobile, wiped the water from her eyes, and tightened her grip on the handlebars. She could feel the mountain's eyes on her. The storm seemed to pause for a heartbeat, as if waiting to see what she would do. She gunned the throttle. The machine roared forward, treads slamming against the wood. The bridge shook violently, echoing like thunder beneath her. She leaned forward, urging it across. The sled lurched after, wood groaning under the bear's massive weight. The first 10 feet held. Rain pounded, wind howled, but the bridge clung stubbornly. Then a plank snapped. The snowmobile jolted, one tread slamming into the gap. Martha's teeth rattled as she yanked the handlebars hard, steering it back onto solid wood. She glanced over her shoulder. The sled bounced, one runner catching in the broken gap. For a sickening moment it teetered, then slammed free, continuing forward. The bridge groaned louder. Water surged around the support beams, tearing at them with relentless force. "Come on," Martha begged through clenched teeth. Halfway across now. The headlights illuminated the far bank, trees swaying wildly in the storm. Salvation, just yards away. Then, another snap. Louder this time. The entire left railing tore free, plunging into the river. Planks buckled beneath the snowmobile, splinters flying. The bridge tilted dangerously sideways. The sled slid toward the edge. "No!" Martha screamed. She gunned the throttle, the machine screaming as it surged forward. The sled skidded, half of it hanging over open water. Ropes stretched taut, fibers tearing, threatening to give way. The bear shifted with a weak growl, his massive body tipping farther toward the edge. Martha's hands shook. If the sled went, she couldn't save him. Her mind raced. The ropes. If she cut them, the snowmobile would make it across. She could save herself. Her throat closed. She gripped the knife at her belt, her entire body trembling. One cut, and she'd live. The bear groaned again, eyes fluttering. Martha froze. The sound wasn't just pain. It was trust. Her jaw clenched. With a growl of her own, she shoved the knife back into its sheath and slammed the throttle open. The snowmobile screamed, treads spitting wood and water. The bridge howled like it was tearing itself apart. The sled scraped, tilted, then slammed back onto the planks. Ropes stretched to their limit, strands snapping, but somehow holding. The far bank loomed closer, headlights bouncing off wet trees. 20 feet. 10. 5. With a final, bone-rattling lurch, they shot off the bridge and onto solid earth. Martha yanked the brake, the snowmobile skidding to a muddy halt. She collapsed forward against the handlebars, chest heaving, sobs tearing free in ragged bursts. Behind her, the bridge gave one final groan and collapsed. The sound of shattering wood echoed through the valley, swallowed by the raging river below. The bridge was gone. Martha twisted around. The sled was still there. The bear was still breathing. Her body shook with relief, exhaustion threatening to drag her to the ground. But she couldn't stop. Not yet. They had crossed the worst of it. But dawn was still hours away, and the storm wasn't finished. She forced her body upright, wiped the rain from her face, and whispered, "We made it." The bear's chest rose and fell, slow but steady. For the first time all night, Martha let herself believe they might survive. The bridge collapses behind them, cutting off any retreat. Martha and the bear are safe for now, but the storm still rages, and they must find shelter before dawn. The world beyond the collapsed bridge was no less unforgiving. Rain poured like a curtain of ice, and the wind carried a banshee's howl as it rattled through the drenched forest. Martha sat slumped against the snowmobile, her lungs dragging in ragged gasps. The roar of the river behind her was steady, almost mocking, a reminder of what they had barely survived. But survival wasn't guaranteed. Not yet. She forced her head up, water dripping from her hair, plastered against her cheeks. The bear still lay on the sled, massive chest rising and falling in shallow, rhythmic effort. His muzzle twitched once, nostrils flaring weakly as if testing the air. Alive. Still alive. Martha closed her eyes, letting that fact anchor her for a single heartbeat. Then she pushed herself to her feet. Her body screamed in protest, her knees buckled, her shoulders ached from hauling rope and gear all night. But there was no option left but forward. She tugged on the rope, guiding the snowmobile once more down the storm-slick path. The trail had narrowed, hemmed in by fallen branches and mudslides that oozed down from the ridges above. Every few yards, the machine threatened to bog down. Martha coaxed it along, leaning with her whole weight, whispering encouragement as if it were a living thing. Just a little farther. Through the blur of rain, she recognized the valley's shape. They were close to an old ranger's outpost, half a mile, maybe less. She remembered its sagging roof, the stone chimney her father used to point out when they hiked this trail. If it still stood, it might be the only dry place for miles. Another flash of lightning split the sky. For an instant, the valley ahead blazed in stark silver, trees bending, rain carving streaks in the mud, and there, a dark silhouette against the hillside, hunched but standing. The outpost. Martha's throat tightened. She urged the snowmobile forward, weaving through debris, mud splattering her jeans. At last, the machine sputtered and coughed, its tank nearly dry. With a final shudder, it stalled completely. Her heart sank. She turned the key again. Nothing. Just the hiss of rain. They would walk the rest. Martha wrapped the lead rope around her waist, braced her boots, and hauled. The sled groaned, the bear's weight almost unmovable. Mud sucked at her legs, water streamed into her boots, every inch forward an agony. She leaned forward until her back felt ready to snap, one foot grinding in front of the other. 10 feet. 20. 50. Her vision blurred. But she didn't stop. The outpost loomed closer, its wood dark and waterlogged, but walls still intact. One shutter banged loose in the wind. She staggered up the final incline, her muscles trembling, until she reached the sagging porch. Shelter. Martha dropped to her knees, rope slipping from numb fingers. For a long moment she simply knelt in the rain, forehead pressed to the wood, sobbing soundlessly. Then she forced herself up again. The bear needed her still. She dragged the sled the final few feet under the porch roof, then shouldered the door open with a sharp crack of old hinges. The smell of rot and ash greeted her, but the interior was dry. Cobwebs laced the corners, dust clung to the hearth, but a stack of old firewood rested near the stone fireplace. Hope sparked. She pulled the sled inside. The bear shifted, releasing a deep, rumbling groan that seemed to vibrate through the cabin floor. His eyes flickered open, catching hers. Martha crouched beside him, one hand steadying his muzzle. His fur was drenched, cold, and sticky with drying blood from wounds that had long since scabbed but reopened during the ordeal. She whispered, "You're safe now. Just a little longer." Her hands worked on autopilot. She built a fire in the stone hearth, coaxing sparks from brittle kindling, feeding it until flames licked and shadows danced across the cabin walls. Heat rolled outward, warm and golden, chasing away the damp. Steam began to rise from her soaked clothes, from the bear's fur as the warmth reached him. His eyes closed again, chest rising a fraction deeper. Martha tore strips from her spare shirt, wrapping them around the worst of his wounds. She pressed gently where blood seeped, wincing at his low growl but continuing anyway. Her motions were firm but tender, the way her father had taught her when she was a girl helping mend injured wildlife. Outside, the storm began to tire. Rain softened to a drizzle, thunder grumbled as if retreating into the distance. The cabin creaked with each gust, but its walls held. Hours blurred together. Martha kept the fire fed, changed bindings, whispered to the bear in half-conscious murmurs. She told him about her father, about the winters they spent in these mountains. She confessed the fear that had gnawed at her every time the storm hit and he appeared by the cabin door. And she admitted something she hadn't said aloud to anyone. "I think you've been protecting me," she whispered. "All this time." The bear's ear twitched. A soft, low sound rumbled from his throat. Not aggression. Not warning. Something else, acknowledgement. Dawn bled slowly into the sky, pale and cold. Light seeped through the cracks of the shutters, painting the cabin with fragile silver. Martha opened the door. Mist curled across the valley, the world washed clean after the storm. She turned back. The bear's eyes were open, clearer now. He shifted, muscles rippling beneath damp fur, and with effort, pushed himself halfway upright. Martha's breath caught. He was weak, but he was alive. He met her gaze. For a long moment, nothing moved, only the crackle of the fire, the whisper of dawn outside. Martha stepped closer, crouched, and rested her hand against his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. The bear exhaled, warm breath washing over her arm. His massive head dipped once, almost imperceptibly. Then, with a slow effort, he turned his gaze toward the open door, toward the valley that awaited him. Martha's chest ached. She knew what it meant. "You're free now," she said softly. With unsteady strength, the bear rose, towering even in his weakness. He took one step, then another, toward the open door. Martha followed him onto the porch, barefoot on the wet wood, watching as he paused at the edge. Mist curled around his legs, the valley stretching endless and wild before him. He turned his head once more. Their eyes met in the gray morning. Then he lumbered forward into the mist, fading slowly into the forest. Martha stood alone, heartbreaking and mending all at once. She whispered into the dawn. "Guard the mountains, like you guarded me." The storm was over. The bond between woman and bear had carried them through fear, trial, and near death. Martha was alive, the bear was alive, and the mountain was quiet once more. As she sat on the porch, firelight at her back and dawn ahead, she knew the story would stay with her forever. The night a bear had fought to survive, and a human had fought to keep him alive. And somewhere in the forest, she believed, he would remember too. What would you have done, standing at that bridge? Would you have cut the rope? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe animals can feel trust just as deeply as we do, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll keep sharing stories of the wild, where survival and connection meet.